106.3 FM, The Source.
My goodness, there are some interesting people on this planet, and we have the privilege of getting a chance to talk to them on this radio show, and our next guest is in that category of being definitely interesting. Actually, we have two guests on the phone. Franz J. Sedelmayer, I hope I'm saying his name right, served in the German armed forces at Russian President Vladimir Putin's request. Franz created and trained the KGB's first Western-style SWAT team. He developed and exported standardized equipment and training packages to counter terrorist units in Europe, Latin America, and the Middle East. He's the founder of the St. Petersburg, Russia International Business Association. He served as an advisor to the am I saying that right? Kazakh government. He's the CEO of Mark LLC, specializing in international dispute and crisis management and worldwide claim recovery services. Oh my goodness! And
I know, it's amazing.
He's on the phone with New York Times bestselling author John Weisman. Together, they're on the phone to talk to us about the book called "Welcome to Putingrad: The Incredible Story of the Only Man to Collect Money from Vladimir Putin." Oh my gosh, what an amazing memoir this is! Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you both for being on the show with us today.
Good morning. Good to be with you, Larry.
Good morning, Larry. Thank you for having us.
I'm guessing the second voice is Franz. Is that right?
Yes, sir. The one with the German accent. This would be me.
And where are you both? Where are you calling from?
We are calling from Pensacola this morning.
Oh, okay. So you're both not too far away.
No, just about 4.5, 5 hours from you guys on I-10.
Right. Are you in Florida to promote the book?
Franz is in Florida to promote the book. I'm in Pensacola because I live here and love it.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you both for being on the air with us. So let me see. I know there's so many questions about the book, but how did the two of you partner up to make the book, to write the book?
You want to answer that?
I think so. When I was very young and very new to the business, I ended up at a party in Crystal City, close to Washington, D.C., and I ran into a fellow spilling a drink on him by the name of Dick Marcinko, who was then the head of SEAL Team 6. And many years later, I went to the airport and I saw a book called The Rogue Warrior, which was written by John Weisman, which I picked up, and I really liked reading it because it contained not just good descriptions of what the trade was about in those days, but also had a really, really nice and good sense of humor. And it was written very detailed in information, so I really loved that. And then when I turned around and I planned to do my own project, the first person I called and contacted was John Weisman.
Wow.
And we hit it off, and I never talked to anybody else, and I'm so glad we did, because he knows the trade. He has got this wonderful sense of humor. He's a very wise man, as the name indicates. And we had a ball writing this book. It was just a fantastic experience for me.
Wow. So, John, I wanted to ask you this question, and then it'll lead into the book. What did Franz tell you that got you interested in this project?
Well, I have been covering Russia for years, and especially interested in intelligence matters. And Franz's story is unique. When he told it to me, I thought to myself, my God, this is a metaphor to tell people why the Russia you see right now is the Russia you see right now, why Putin does why he does, because all of this started when he was deputy mayor of St. Petersburg, and Franz was meeting with him on a regular basis. There are about 40 books out on Vladimir Putin. Franz is the only person who's written a book about Vladimir Putin who actually has spent any time with him. All the other books are written by people who did maybe one interview and then did a lot of research. But Franz has met with the guy face to face, and I thought to myself, that is unique.
Yeah.
That is unique. You got to tell that story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess let's get a little sample of that story, Franz. How did you? It says here that your story kind of starts at the age of 26. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. That was my first trip to then still USSR. It was the year before the wall came down. And I went over there very reluctant to what I would find, and actually came back all excited because I knew this market, this new opening under Gorbachev, would be quite interesting for us. And little did I know that the wall would come down. That was a surprise for everyone. And then all of a sudden, the next thing is I'm starting a joint venture over there. And 6 months later, the whole of the USSR implodes, and all of a sudden I'm sitting in a country called Russia, and with other 14 republics around it that used to be once in one country.
Yeah.
So it was a very exciting time, a very exciting ride. And when I did my chronological order of events, I still remember my surprise when I saw that events that I thought were 3 and 6 months apart were actually 1 and 2 and 3 weeks apart, because things were so fast moving in those days.
Really? So prior to this, I mean, you must have had a career in police in order for them to ask you to create a police supply and training company.
Well, I had, when I got out of high school, I joined the German paratroopers. Then I went off to go to school for a while in Utah. And then I had a friend of mine, I had an interest in supplying special operations equipment, which was still fairly a very, very new industry. You had small specialized firms, sometimes 1, sometimes 2, sometimes 4 people manufacturing 1 or 2 items, and I thought, wow, that is something with a future. And I put together standardized equipment packages for counter-terrorist forces around the world. And I got into that trade at a fairly young age. I was the first to do so. And I hooked up with Ulrich Wegener from the GC9. We did supplies for his new mission training mission down in Saudi Arabia. Uh-huh. And then along the lines, I got notified that the Russians are reaching out, the Russian police. But in those days, of course, nobody really from a government side was willing and able to deal with them. And that's how I jumped on the wagon, so to speak,
wow.
And I ended up going there.
I have a question that I hope it's going to make me seem a little ignorant, but that's not unusual. Were you, earlier in your life, were you in what we used to call East Germany or West Germany?
West Germany, sir. Okay. Bavaria, to be specific, born and raised in Munich.
Oh, okay. So were you, being from the west side of Germany, did you have to pass some tests? Were you vetted, I guess, is the best way to ask that, before you could work for the USSR and eventually Russia?
No, that never happened.
No, really?
Anything coming out of the West these days was something they wanted it big time, and they wanted it hard.
Oh, okay. And would somebody be able to do that today, or is that kind of changed?
Well, I think the biggest change is the corruption factor. Before you get to supply anybody with anything, they expect a payoff.
Has the personality of Mr. Putin changed from the time you first met him till now?
Tremendously. And like I say in my book, Welcome to Putingrad, I want my old Putin back, because he used to be a really good guy. He was straight, he was forward, he was not crooked. The only thing he had to get himself involved in, that was part of his job description, was to serve as a fixer for the mayor of St. Petersburg, Anatoly Sobchak, which unfortunately was corrupt to the bone. And this type of loyalty, by keeping the mayor out of trouble, that earned him a post with the Yeltsin family later on. And you remember, he made him the chief of KGB, then the prime minister, and then eventually appointed him as acting president before the popular elections.
Wow. Would you still be able to sit down with him if you went back there today?
I don't think so. I think he's living in a bubble. He's surrounded by people that say yes a lot. If he has to open his mouth to give instructions, the person already lost his career, because they're supposed to read it from his eyes. He's a different guy.
The one thing I often wonder, maybe you could speak about this, is that like our country or not, at least we have a rule: you can't be president for more than 8 years. Is that what contributes to a dictator's change in attitude, any arrogance that you might perceive from a dictator like Putin? Is it because he could be there forever if he wanted to be?
Maybe not forever, because Russia is always good for a surprise, and I never stopped saying that anybody could get a very pleasant surprise sometime down the line from the Russian population, which is sick and tired of this graft, of this fleecing of the country, of the corruption, of the absence of the rule of law, of the permanent violations of all human rights, of your property rights. So Putin is operating acting as a dictator because he has no place to go to. He has no future outside the presidency. He has no one to replace him. I mean, essentially, and we say that in the book Welcome to Putingrad really well. He has no Putin who could replace him. He was acting for the Yeltsin. He was looking out for their interests. When he took office, first thing he did, he signed a pardon for the whole family.
John, I'm curious if part of the attraction to this story was because it is making commentary on politics in general, and maybe can be applicable in some ways to the United States. Was that part of what your vision was?
Well, certainly it was. My take has always been that we have misread the Russians under Putin. And one of the things that brought Franz and me together was that he thought that way too, which is counterintuitive to what you read in much of the press today. And the other thing that I thought was unique about the story was the fact that Franz, because he was subject to all of this corruption, by all previous rules, should have just given up, folded his tent, and gone away. What he did was he said no, and when the Russians refused to pay him, he took 100+ cases to court and won them. So that ultimately what started as a $2.35 million award in Sweden became more than $10 million worth of property that Franz took from the Russians and sold off.
Oh, wow. Wow. Where were you living at that time, Franz?
In France and in Germany.
Okay.
And what we did is we foreclosed on their trade missions in Cologne, Germany, and in Stockholm, Sweden.
At one point, Franz made them so nervous at an air show that they flew their biggest Tupolev, I think it was, jet, back to Russia early because they were afraid he was going to take it.
Including the economic delegation that was transported on that airplane. And it was wonderful because it was 3 days before the show ended. The world press was there. And you can see this one lone journalist says, behind me, see the empty space? Where our Tupolev aircraft was. And then the camera, they switched to Moscow, and the aircraft had just landed, and the head of the delegation came down the stairs from the airplane, and they asked him, how come you're back so early? And the guy said, literally, we had such good flying weather.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, my gosh. So tell us a little bit about what we will learn from the book. It sounds interesting, and it sounds like you've given it made it a really great read, John. But will we learn a little bit about ourselves by reading this?
Well, I think what you will learn when you read the book is that just about everything you've heard about Russia is wrong. I think you will learn from reading Welcome to Putingrad that Putin wasn't always the Putin we see now. And I think the other thing is that there are certain resemblances from the way Putin governs today to the way Donald Trump governs today. They're both, for example, kind of seat-of-the-pants guys who make decisions based on emotions as well as business sense. And I think the other thing about Putin that people will learn in the book is the way he lives now is something he's actually been known to say, which is, for my enemies, the law. For my friends, everything. Think of a country governed that way.
So in Trump's earlier days as a businessman, he did fly by the seat of his pants, and nothing different about that. Was Putin in his early days as a mayor, vice assistant under the mayorship in St. Peter? Was he also fly by the pants back then, or is that something he became later on?
No, that was his modus operandi. Just like Mr. Trump, Putin is not an avid, reader of files. He's the type of guy who relies on the people around him to give him a short report on things, and based on that information, he will make the decisions. And he's a stomach person. He has a certain vanity, if not a little bit of narcissism too. And he's a pretty small in height, and so he has to come across like a very serious person. And I think you can see that very well when you look at all the different pictures when he's riding half naked on a horse and so forth, or when he's hunting crocodiles or lions or tigers.
Right? Yeah. Well, I think that's probably true. I think narcissism probably is evident in both Putin and Trump.
Right. So they have more things in common than actually what sets them apart. I think the biggest difference is that Mr. Trump comes from a very affluent family and Mr. Putin grew up very poor.
When you both were compiling the book and writing the book together, did you have any fears for yourselves or your family?
No, we were hiding. No, just kidding. we had absolute fun doing this, and don't forget, I've been in a protected dispute with the Russians for over 20 years. I've gone through all the motions of fear. I've gone through all the motions of threats. I've always stood my ground, and there was no reason not to continue that today.
So where is home? Yeah, I know that your home is not in Pensacola. Where is home?
No. My home is I'm living south of Munich.
Oh, you still live in Munich? Oh, okay. Oh, gosh. I mean, this is so exciting that you wrote this book, and it gives us an insight. All right. In my notes, it says to ask you this question. What is an Übernakelnik? What is that?
Oh, Nachalnik.
Nachalnik is the direct translation for Nachalnik would be boss. And the Russians have this thing that someone reaches a certain point in his career, for most as a bureaucrat. I don't care if it's if it works for law enforcement or if he's in city government or in federal government or in parliament. And after reaching that certain point in his career, he can no longer do anything wrong. And the system will absolutely protect him.
Here's Nachalniks can take anything from anybody. For example, Bob Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, was in Russia for an economic conference, and he's showing his Super Bowl ring to Rupert Murdoch. Putin walks up and says, "Can I see the ring?" And Robert Kraft takes it off, hands it to Putin. Putin puts it on and walks off with it.
Oh, my gosh. I remember that story. Yeah.
Putin walks on, and you know why he felt entitled to do that? Because he's Nachalnik. He can get away with it. And by the way, he got away with it because the State Department said to Robert Kraft, "Please don't complain." And Kraft has said to Putin, "I will build you a Super Bowl ring, and you can have it. I just like mine back because that's the first one we earned." And Putin still hasn't given it back.
Oh, my gosh. God. Isn't that disgusting? Can I ask, what is life like for the average Russian, the people who are not involved in politics, just the people working day to day? What is their life like?
Their life is full of misery. Because, literally speaking, and it's gotten worse under Putin. Putin has not invented graft and corruption, but he certainly cultivated it, leading to a situation today that, when you move into a new apartment and need a telephone, you have to go over to the phone company, pay somebody off under the table, then you have to pay off the guy that installs the telephone, and if you don't, you're not going to have a phone line.
Oh, my God. Wow.
And the traffic police, they stop you at will. And if you don't give them money, they're going to impound your car or take your driver's license away, even though he hadn't done anything.
And
this is the reality of life. And when you go to court, and if you don't bribe the judge, you're not winning this case.
Oh, my gosh.
Is Putin to blame for this?
Absolutely. Because what used to be very typical mafia-type scenario done by, bad people, but private people, now has been taken over by government employees, by bureaucrats, by policemen, by intelligence guys, by judges, by prosecutors. As a normal Russian, you have grievances because somebody took something away from you, or somebody stole something, or whatever the case may be. You have no one to turn to. Literally speaking, there is no rule of law.
What is the condition of religion in Russia? Do they allow religion?
They allow religion. As a matter of fact, Putin and the Kremlin have aligned themselves with the Russian Orthodox Church. In order to understand that a little bit, you have to know that over 70% of the priests in the Soviet Union have been working actively for the KGB. So it's like their sister organization.
Oh my God.
And Putin, of course, also uses the church for political gain. There's a certain extent of homophobia with Mr. Putin and his people, and there's a certain element of racism. There's a certain element of controlling people by introducing new laws, for example, the law on blasphemy, which lends itself to put political opponents to prison.
Think of this. Russia today has an anti-blasphemy law. It's 14th century, right?
Yeah.
Who has anti-blasphemy laws?
Yeah.
Pakistan does. Saudi Arabia does. And you get your head chopped off if you commit blasphemy, or you get 1,000 lashes.
Right.
Russia now has a blasphemy law in the 21st century.
Well, and if you think about their behavior is more blasphemous than any blasphemous statement would be.
Absolutely.
We had that news story this morning about the 39 Russian athletes. They're going through appeal hearings about the 2014 Olympic Games. Is Putin going to step in on that one, or let it run its course?
He can step in all he wants. The decision on that is made, and I don't think any of these suspensions will be lifted. The biggest pity is that all these Russian athletes have been under a government-sponsored doping program. I would think that most of them did not have much of a choice, but to participate just like in the days of the USSR. We have had that as Germans too. The East Germans did that. And as you know, it's not just cheating in the competition, but it also has serious health consequences later in life.
Yeah. What a fascinating conversation. I found the book on Amazon, and I'm using that picture for the podcast. And you have across the board 5-star ratings from your readers. So you two guys have done something right. So I found it on Amazon. Do you have a website you want to direct us to?
Yes, sir. It's called www.welcometoputingrad.com, and your listeners can actually listen to George Geidel narrating this book. He's done a wonderful job. You can also download the first chapter for free, and I think you'll like it. And the book is a lot of fun. People have been saying it's like a White House briefing, just a lot more fun.
What is your prediction for the relationship between the United States and Russia? What should we expect in the next couple of years?
Expect that they will oppose us. Expect that they will do more of the same. As long as Putin is there, he needs us. He needs the West. He needs the United States as an enemy. They're very good, as you know, in influencing certain processes in our democracies. They're very good in sowing distrust between NATO partners, in spoiling the transatlantic relations between Europe and the United States and Canada. And we should all be on the lookout, and it's high time we all get on the same page again and resist this enemy.
Well,
Russia is our enemy, unfortunately, today. Not the Russian people, but the Kremlin and Vladimir Putin and his cronies are.
And I think the book that you both have written is probably going to help a lot of us understand better what we need to be doing with our votes. John Weisman and Franz Sedelmayer, what an amazing interview. I can't wait to read the book. It's called Welcome to Putingrad. Go to the website, go to Amazon, go to any bookstore, and go get a copy. Thank you, guys. Thank you for being on the show today.
Hey, Larry, thank you.
Larry, it was a pleasure. Thank you. Anytime.
You're
Take
welcome.
care.
We'll be right back.
Bye.
Keep up with what's going on in the downtown area with Ocala Downtown Newspaper. Delivering thousands of newspapers to businesses in the downtown area, Ocala Downtown is there to keep you informed. They even have Tom's Picks, a free referral for people who are looking for a company to do work for them. Tom's Picks will refer the company that fits your needs, and all we ask in return is that you tell them where you heard about it. It's simple. For more info, just call Tom's Picks, 352-804-1223. Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
And that could get longer for federal employees affected by the government shutdown that kicked in Saturday.
Most staff at the EPA and the Departments of Housing, Education, and Commerce will be staying home today, and about half of the workers in the Treasury, Health, Defense, and Transportation Department